widely recognized for his work on behavior-driven development and for coining the term deliberate discovery. Daniel Terhorst-North is known for his unique combination of wit, intellect, and fearlessness, combined with a deep understanding of agile, enterprise technology, and human nature. And that's just what they say behind his back. He's an author, another seasoned MVP in the game with a knack for supporting leaders in solving complex problems. He's what we call a true pioneer. He's also funny, as I've had the pleasure of learning, but then again, I think I'm funny, so I don't really know if that's a good thing or a bad thing. It doesn't matter if you're here for the wisdom, the wit, or just to see what new analogy he might come up with today. It'll surely be a treat to beat. Okay, so thanks very much. Welcome, Daniel.
Thank you. I was amazed that previous, Michael managed to squeeze like an entire history of generative AI into about 14 seconds. I'm there, I've got homework. There's a lot of stuff to go. I want to talk about change. So, hi, I'm Daniel. I've been softwaring for about 35 years. And roughly in decades. So first decade, developer with various adjectives in front of that. And then 10 years with a company called ThoughtWorks, where I was doing lots of hand-waving. And then last 12 years or so, I've been independent. And what I do, I go into organizations and I help them work better. So there you go, that's my plug. So, and I realized one of these kind of 20/20 hindsight things, I look at my career and I've sort of panned outwards. So I start with code, and then you have like teams that work with code, and then teams of teams, and then organizations, which is teams of teams of teams. But it's all the same kind of puzzles, right? It's all the how can we get everything lined up so it all points in the same direction. So let me start then. What do we mean by change? So I had an epiphany a couple of years ago. I've been thinking about change as a product. I've been thinking about change as a product because I spent some time working with a very smart product guy who sees everything as a product, and now I see everything as a product. It's one of these viral things that you can't unsee. So a product is a thing that helps you make progress in a particular way. Okay? There's a whole school called Jobs to be Done, theory of jobs to be done, a chap called Chris Claytonson, and he talks about you hire a product to do a job. And so rather than thinking about personas, and we have a 34-year-old woman who's got a child, and she's going to go and use an ATM, and she wants to get money out. And meanwhile, we're persona modeling, right? It doesn't matter if she's a homemaker or a CEO or both, right? What she wants to do is get 50 euros out of an ATM in the tipping rain on a Sunday night, right? That's the job. Yeah? So if we focus on the job, we start to understand really whether the product we've got is doing that job. So, okay, so when I talk to people about change, they go, oh, we need to do stuff, right? I go, well, tell me why. And they say things like, I've got lots of disparate teams that need to work together. That's a thing I hear a lot. I've inherited a bunch of teams. We've had a reorg, yet another reorg. It's Tuesday. Right, another reorg, and I've got a bunch of teams, and they sort of do the same kind of thing, because I'm the sort of thing manager, but they're all doing different stuff. This is great. This is typically C-suite. We need to demonstrate that we're doing something, is in capitals, right? Doing something to the board, doing something to our shareholders. We have to demonstrate that we're doing something, because things have to be seen to be done. In a similar way, again, picking up on Michael's, like there's a FOMO thing, right? I need to keep up with my peers. They're all rubbing AI into things, so I'm going to rub AI into things, right? Or it was blockchain a minute ago, and then it was calculators. So I need to keep up with people. I've got to not fall behind. Yes, we need to change. Why? Because we've got to keep up. Okay. Another one I hear a lot is, I want to know if we're even working on the right things, right? I've got a big organization, maybe thousands of people, lots of activity, but I don't know whether we're working on things we should be working on. So I'm like, okay, well, thanks. That's a really useful instruction. I'm going to go and meet some people. I'm going to go and talk to some people. So I start with these folks, the delivery managers. And they're typically managing, again, teams of teams. And I say, hello, what's on your mind? And they say, we've got lots of teams, right? And some of these teams need to coordinate. They're part of the same program of work. I might have, 60, 80 people in half a dozen teams or whatever that are kind of off doing their own thing, and it's really hard. I can't just stand back and squint and have an idea what's going on. We don't know what they're working on, right? Because they're all using different language, and they're saying different things, and it's really hard to figure out what's going on. And we don't know who to help. We see our job as a sort of servant leader, the David Marquette, turn the ship around, leader kind of thing, where our job as managers, as delivery managers, program managers, is to help our teams, is to create an environment where they can do good work. We don't know of the hundreds of people out there, the tens of teams. We don't know where we need to be spending our time. We need to scale delivery. Well, okay, scaling delivery sounds like a useful thing that you should get good at. That's a great idea. And then I go up the food chain, get to the exec, and the exec always asks two questions. What are we spending our money on? How's it going? Right? That's the whole question. What are we spending our money on is investment, right? That's your strategy. How's it going is risk. That's your governance, right? And we need strategy, we need governance. The problem is, in any large, non-trivial organization, we've got no idea what we're spending our money on, and we've got no idea how it's going, okay? And then, now let's go and ask the actual people on the ground, right? How are you folks? We never see the impact of our work. I describe it as distant in time and space. The impact of your work is distant in time and space from where the work happens, yeah? Priorities keep changing. Right, this thing that was the most important thing is now suddenly this thing over here is the most important thing, and I need to context switch. And that thing that was now oh, hang on a minute, we've had yet another change of senior, whatever, another CXO whistle through. And then I do a thing, and I discover sometime later that she's built exactly the same thing in her team. Because they needed it, we didn't know we had the same problem, right? So we keep reinventing wheels, not because of not invented here, because we simply didn't know, yeah? And no one's listening. We've got these delivery managers. I never see them. They're always in meetings, right? They're always spread too thin. I understand it's not a me thing. I hope it's not a me thing. But they're never around, right? They're always just off doing other stuff. We need some kind of cross-team visibility. We need to be able to see what each other's doing. And we want to kind of leverage some of that wonderful tooling stuff that Kent was talking about earlier. We build a thing over here, and suddenly another team over here can make use of it. That's really handy, shared internal code stuff. So let's go back to our questions. Then, if you look at these questions, they kind of, or these needs, they kind of fall into two groups, right? So the first group is these two. I want to demonstrate we're doing something. I want to keep up. I want FOMO. I've got FOMO. When I look at this, I think, you don't actually care what you do. You just need to be doing something, right? You need the illusion of something else. What you need, my friend, is theater, okay? The thing that'll help you is theater. We're going to have some delivery theater. We're going to have some governance theater. And so what does that look like? Well, that's scaling theater. Scaling theater is my favorite. So here's my people in my teams, and they're all going stuff, and that's great. So the first thing I do is, do I go and talk to the team? No. First thing, I grab them all the teams, and I put them into little cookie-cutter identity. I can call them scrum teams, or I call them feature teams, or sometimes you're allowed to have component teams, or if you're going all team topology, you get another couple. But basically, everyone has to fit in one of a small set of cookie cutters, because that's how we're going to do transformation, right? Now, clearly, these people are now running a different organization. They didn't design this. This happened to them. But look, we've got training. We've got training. So, right, they now, magically, you're a wizard, Harry, right? You're a train driver, or whatever we're going to call it. You're an agile release master thing. Okay, 2 days well spent, right? And off they go. And the problem with this kind of arbitrary restructuring thing, whether it be the safe or the less or the disciplined agile or the scrum at scale or all of the things, right? And most of my work is going in and clearing up after this. Yeah. The problem, you actually have two problems. The first problem you create is how on earth do we make the work fit into those teams? Yeah? Which is a bit annoying. Water. Yes, there's some water. So the first question we have is how are we going to get the work to fit into the teams, especially when you have the systems where only one person knows how it works. Only one or two people know how the data works, how the system works, how the integration points work, and they're off in one of the other cookie cutters. Right? The work on this system landed in this team. They've now got a knowledge dependency on another team. So you get all these kind of implicit dependency circles. That's the easy, splitting the work's the easy part, right? Bringing it back together again into some kind of series of magical releases, right? That's much harder, right? How do you integrate all this stuff? So this is scaling theatre. Strategy and governance theatre are much easier to describe. Strategy and governance theatre, I'm going to suspect that some people in this room may have experienced this. You fire an arrow, and the arrow might say, implement safe, or implement less, or do Scrum at scale, or whatever. There's a methodology thing, okay? And we've got no idea how that's going to map to business impact, to how effective our organization is. Then what we do is paint a target around it and go, yes! Declare victory. Right? We are certified. We've done the thing. And you're like, so strategy is implement the methodology, and governance is, are we implementing the methodology? Right? And everyone can sit around and feel really pleased with themselves. And that's wonderful, okay? So that's one thing you can do. Another thing you can do, and these are much more the kind of organizations I like to work with or choose. Brilliant thing about being independent, I get to choose who I play with. I didn't realize this for a while, how wonderfully liberating this is. But any other independent folks out there, you'll know what I'm talking about. They say things like this: I've got lots of teams that need to work together. Okay, that sounds like a genuine need. That sounds like something I can help you with, right? I want to know if we're even working on the right things. So in this case, we start with the need. Understand your goal. Understand what it is. Do you need these people to work together because you're trying to make your operation cost less, trying to save some money, right? There's two ways of trimming fat. One is to exercise and lose weight. The other is to chop off your leg, right? One of these is sustainable. So start with our goal and then iterate in very deliberate small steps towards your goal and measure and learn and measure and learn and measure and learn so that the whole thing is sustainable, so the whole thing is accountable, so the whole thing, you can say, yes, this is actually working. So this is my plug, a very short plug. So this is what I've been doing for the last 12, 15 years or so. And in the last year, I gave it a name, and it's called Goalwards, and that's where it is. There you go. That's the whole of the selly bit, but come and talk to me if this is stuff that's going to be useful to you. So how do we do this? What does effective scaling look like? So unsurprisingly, effective scaling starts where you are. I'm not going to reorg everything. I was at John Lewis in the UK, big retail, John Lewis partnership, so big retail group that is John Lewis stores and Waitrose supermarkets. And they have 60,000 partners, it's employee-owned, 60,000 partners, 3,000 of those in their head office, 1,000 of those are in IT, 90 of them, when I met them, 90 of them in what they called online. Online was web, mobile, basically all the kind of digital platform stuff. 90 people supporting a 60,000 person operation. 40% of their revenue was coming through online. 40% of £10 billion a year turnover was coming through this little 90-person group holding things up like this. And they'd scaled, they'd grown to 90. They didn't start at 90, and they were still growing. And that's when they got me in. They said, look, we know that we're getting a little bit kind of fragmented and whatever. Can you help us all point in the same direction? Yes, I probably can. And so, of course, all these teams are thinking, oh, no, bloody consultant coming in. He's going to bloody tell us to bloody Scrum or Kanban or something, right? He's going to have a thing. So I came in, and they all kind of held their breath, like, what's he going to do? I said, right, carry on. Whatever you're doing right now is fine. You lot, crack on. Brilliant. I love what you're doing. You lot over here. And I just said to them, do what you're doing. It's absolutely fine. what we did is we said, we're going to make all of the teams we've currently got, we're going to make them awesome, right? How do we make them awesome? We don't know. We go and meet them. We go and find out what their needs are, and we listen to them because they know best, yeah? And then we said, okay, as a program of work now, we want to understand where we're at. And so we introduced some team metrics. 3 very obvious team metrics. You've probably heard these. Lead time, throughput, work in process. They're called flow metrics. Lead time, how long does a thing take? And many definitions of lead time out there. My definition of lead time is probably more like tact time if you're going to get technical. But lead time is from commitment to thank you. From I'm going to do your thing to, oh, thanks, you did my thing, right? Because until they say thank you, the clock's still ticking. So you go, oh, we measure until it goes live. Is anyone using it yet? No. Well, then you're not done, right? We measure until it goes into test. That's my favorite one. It goes out of it's now in test. It's in test, so we're done. No, you're not, right? Someone hasn't said thank you. When someone says thank you, you get to stop the clock. How long do things take? How many things did you finish in the last couple of weeks? We do this on a 2-week cycle, 2-week kind of cadence. So how many things did you do in the last 2 weeks? How many things are you working on right now? That's work in process. How many things are you context switch in between? Didn't even define a thing, right? Because if you're a platform service team, your chunk of work, the thing you do, is very different from if you're an Android mobile team, right? That's a very different thing. So you work on things. You choose what a thing is. You measure how long they are. And how are you going to compare the teams? I'm not going to compare the teams. What? Why do you want this data? I want to compare you with previous versions of you. So each team is going to now trend itself, okay, which was kind of cool. So and it took not very long, a few weeks, and then so we've now got program-level view of how long things are taking, where they're getting stuck, and all that kind of thing. Rolled up all the team metrics into a team dashboard, and that meant then we could adapt to changing demand. So changing demand's an interesting one. I want to spend a couple of minutes on this. Most software methods, certainly most agile software methods, obsess about, is this going to work? Yeah, man. Woo. Actually, no, I've got this one. Hang on. You're going to like this. Here, there we go. Mostly, we focus on features, fixes. Most of the stuff on the backlog is features. We're shipping features. All the other work kind of gets either squished in at the edges or doesn't get done. So discovery, choosing what it is we're going to work on. And discovery isn't just product discovery, domain discovery. It could be technology discovery. In a world that's as fast-moving as agentic AI, right, I imagine an awful lot of your day job should be discovery, right? Otherwise, everyone else is going to be there before you. Kaizen. Kaizen is a lovely Japanese word which makes me wise because I'm using Japanese words. Kaizen means continuous improvement. I use Kaizen in a broader sense. Kaizen generally people think of as process of making a process better. I think of Kaizen in terms of the system of work. So anything that changes the system of work to make doing work easier. Okay? So that could be things like learning and development, because we're now bringing new skills and knowledge into the team, which makes it a different team. Things like automation, technical debt, organization, moving people around so we're a different shape. And then you've still got all of the business as usual, keeping the lights on type work. That all still has to get done. All of that is first-class work. And then failure demand, which is responding to things that shouldn't have happened. And it's not just fixing the outage. It's understanding the cascading data corruption that happened because of that. It's having all of the follow-on post-mortem meetings, doing all the work, and so on, right? And what you find then, if you're smart about it, is all the BAU work and the KTLO work and the failure demand work acts as a queue, as a kind of feed into Kaizen work. How could we automate away some of that BAU? How could we automate away some of that? How could we put in some instrumentation around some of the keeping the lights on stuff so it tells us more about it? Another shout out to Honeycomb because they're lovely. So many different types of work, and what Goldwoods does, and what I do, is all of that is first-class work, okay? So I call this thing demand-led planning. I've got some talks online that go in much more detail about it. Hit me up, I'm around for the rest of the afternoon. But I love doing this. I love talking about this. this is such a powerful way of getting 80 people pointing in the same direction. It turns out that the structure your team should be is a direct consequence of the work they want to do, which sounds obvious when you say it out loud, right? But if the nature of the work they want to do is changing as a function of time, so should the structure of the people. And it turns out that isn't as hard to do as you think. So that's effective scaling. What does effective strategy and governance look like? Well, we start with OKRs, but OKRs done right. It's very easy to do OKRs wrong. It's very easy to do OKR theatre and make it look a lot like the thing you used to do, but you scribble out management by objectives and write OKR above it in crayon, right? Not that. A chap called Jeff Got Health and Josh Seiden wrote a wonderful book recently called Who Does What by How Much? So it's a great OKR book. By great, I mean small. I like small books. So Who Does What by How Much? Really good way, little kind of field guide to doing OKR as well. So OKRs map what we want to be spending our money on, right? And then we're going to have OKRs for how we work as well as what we do. So we're going to have key results around things like trending lead time down, trending errors down, as well as key results around business impact. And now we know what we're spending our money on, because it's the stuff directly cascading down from our OKRs, and we know how it's going, because we've got these real-time dashboards of flow metrics, which means we can see what's going on, okay? So that's kind of really what I wanted to share. I want to change, and I want to get away from theatre, where we have a number of certified unicorn poopers. I can certify you as a unicorn pooper. I have a website. Your adherence to the methodology, how much are you, how compliant are we with some arbitrary thing that we have no mapping of between that and whether we're going to be successful. How many dollars we've invested on exec advisory or whatever, AI, ChatGPT generated slop that McKinsey and friends are putting, I don't know, that stuff. And then these self-fulfilling business KPIs, right? Number of seats filled or whatever. I want to get towards something that's much more about team effectiveness metrics, no individual productivity metrics. I can go on for some time about that. Team effectiveness metrics, program impact metrics. Is the work we're doing having the impact it's supposed to be having? If it isn't, we should stop and do something else. And again, how does all this roll up towards where we're trying to go? And then how are we building the structures so that we can create that shared understanding across teams? That's what I wanted to say, so thank you very much. Enjoy the rest of your afternoon.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Daniel. Apologies about that. I forgot my speaker notes, so I was going to be sitting up here in complete silence. Our next speaker is the man behind the scenes, the founder of 9 Dots, and you heard Tom if you were here this morning. He is one of our main sponsors. 9 Dots is one of our main sponsors for the events over the following years. And honestly, it is an absolute honor